Dallas Wings bring up Caitlin Clark, Paige Bueckers for trade talk about first pick. The Dallas Wings have a lot of options with their first overall pick. The Dallas Wings once again have the first overall pick after winning the 2026 draft lottery on Sunday evening. The 2026 WNBA draft isn't scheduled until Monday, April 13th, so there is a lot of time for the Wings to evaluate the draft class, but also explore other options for the pick. Could the Dallas Wings explore trading the first overall pick? It's certainly not out of the question, and Wings GM Curt Miller is at least open to the idea. Drake Keeler of 9 Sports reported that Wings GM Curt Miller said he already received more calls about potential trades for the number 1 pick in the upcoming draft than he did in the lead-up to the 2025 draft. But a lot of that is due to the talent available at the top of the draft. The Caitlin Clark draft, there was not going to be a trade. Paige Bueckers was not going to be traded, but it will be interesting, and it makes our job fun to listen to those phone calls that come in for the number 1 pick. And we'll do what's best for our franchise. Miller said. Miller is saying that every team knew that they wouldn't have traded the Paige Bueckers pick last year, and the Indiana Fever wouldn't have traded the Caitlin Clark pick. Those were generational superstars from the moment they entered college, and the star power and popularity alone would have made it hard to trade those picks. The Indiana Fever are the most popular team in the WNBA because of Clark, and no team saw more social media growth this year than the Wings because of Bueckers. Why the Wings should consider trading the first pick? As of now, there is no player that is a lock to go first overall, but there are plenty of players who could be considered, including Lauren Betts, Awa Pham, Azzi Fudd, Tanaya Latson, and Olivia Miles. If it stays like that all year, and unless the Wings fall in love with a particular player, trading down a few spots may be a great opportunity to gain future draft capital. If they enter the draft saying, "We'd be happy with any of these 3 players," they should trade back to the 3rd pick if the opportunity presents itself and the capital makes sense. They could also use the pick to trade for a ready-made star. A lot of players around the WNBA are entering free agency this offseason, which Miller says having Bueckers and the first pick will be a huge draw in free agency, but the Wings can also be aggressive in trades because of the pick. Read more. Paige Bueckers praised by Cooper Flagg after support at recent Mavericks games. Stick with Wings Game Day for more free coverage of the Dallas Wings throughout the offseason. The Dallas Wings had never been afraid of big swings, but this one stirred the league before the rumor even left the boardroom. As the front office gathered in their practice facility, whiteboards scribbled with cap numbers, draft projections, and projected rotations, one idea rose above the noise. What would it take to get the number 1 pick? In a draft class loaded with potential franchise changers, the top selection carried weight. But the Wings wanted more than a high-ceiling rookie. They wanted a face of the league, a generational playmaker, someone who could transform the franchise overnight. And as President Greg Bibb and GM Aaron Matson discussed possibilities, 2 names, 2 impossibly big names, found themselves on the table. Caitlin Clark, Paige Bueckers. Not because they were available. Not because it was realistic. But because the Wings knew that if you want something unprecedented, you must be willing to imagine the unprecedented. Around the league, their names had become synonymous with star power. Caitlin Clark, the logic-bending sharpshooter lighting up professional arenas. Paige Bueckers, the silky smooth guard poised to enter the WNBA with the same aura that once surrounded Diana Taurasi at UConn. Together, their names generated enough attention to shift conversations, sell tickets, and turn a middling team into a contender. The Wings had talent, great talent. But they wanted identity. They wanted a gravitational force. And in the rooms where bold ideas had shaped the franchise's last 5 years, the discussion unfolded like a script from a basketball drama. If we want number 1, we have to ask. The Wings had reached a familiar crossroads: stay patient with their young core or take a swing big enough to alter the next decade. The number 1 pick was rumored to belong to a rebuilding team open to offers. Open, of course, didn't mean easy. Before they even picked up the phone, the Wings analysts outlined it bluntly. The only way to enter the conversation was to mention names that demanded attention. Caitlin Clark's name was the first one said aloud. Not because she would ever be traded. Indiana would rather sell the statue they were about to build for her, but because Dallas needed to understand the magnitude of the ask. And so they discussed hypotheticals. What would a front office say if we, theoretically, asked about Clark? What would they ask for if we mentioned Bueckers' draft rights? Where is the boundary between possible and impossible? It was the kind of conversation that front offices had annually, wild, whispered, confidential. But in Dallas, the ideas grew louder. A day of whispered shockwaves. Meanwhile, the rumor, because someone always talks, began leaking in fragments. First it reached agents. Then assistant coaches. Then team staffers who had no business knowing but somehow always did. And soon, the league was buzzing. Dallas is talking about trading for the top pick. Clark is being mentioned in hypotheticals. Bueckers could be a centerpiece. Social media erupted within minutes, feeding on speculation like a bonfire on a dry field. Some fans called it ridiculous. Some admired the ambition. Some swore this was proof Dallas wanted a new superstar at any cost. But inside the Wings meeting room, reality was far more strategic. They were not trading Caitlin Clark. They were not acquiring Paige Bueckers' rights. And they were certainly not expecting any team to hand them the number 1 pick for a wish list of players they didn't control. The point was different: to set the internal bar. To make clear that the pick they wanted was valuable enough to require historic-level assets, even if they didn't actually have those assets. Paige Bueckers, the dream scenario. Paige Bueckers' name stayed on the board longer than Clark's. Unlike Clark, whose WNBA rights were locked into the Fever, Paige was not yet drafted. Her eventual entrance into the league, whether a year or 2 away, represented a mystery with enormous payoff. The Wings imagined a scenario where they could somehow position themselves for both, the number 1 pick now and a chance at Bueckers later. It felt like a fantasy roster loaded with guards who could pass, shoot, create, and think the game like a chess match. Someone in the room joked, "This would be the greatest backcourt in sports history." Another added, "We'd sell out every arena for 10 straight years." Even knowing it was unattainable, the thought activated something in the organization: ambition, hunger, vision. Sometimes front offices needed a little dreaming to clarify what they really wanted. When Dallas finally made the official inquiry for the top pick, their tone was measured. They didn't mention Clark. They didn't mention Bueckers. They didn't offer the moon. But the groundwork laid by the internal discussions shaped the seriousness of their approach.